KNB Sensible Solutions. She was introduced to me through Tracy Sponenberg, who is a chief people officer here in the New England area, who I've gotten to know quite well over the last 5 or 10 years. I know a lot of folks are big fans of Tracy. And so when she introduced me to Kim, I said, hey, would love to, pick your brain and understand kind of the work that you've been doing and the lessons that we can learn, and of course, share those with the community. So Kim, thanks a lot for joining us. And
Thanks for having me.
Would you mind giving a little bit of background on yourself, kind of what you've done in your career and what you do now on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, of course. So I have about 20 plus years of diverse HR and operations experience. I've worked in the telecommunications field, from being a people leader, managing like the tech team. You remember, I'm dating myself, back in the days when you had to call and the agent would like troubleshoot with you, put your aux cable into the input and output. So I led a team there, did a lot of, people management, right? Disciplinary, HRIS stuff. And I stayed in that space for about 10 plus years. And then I got into training, corporate training. So I was a trainer at Blue Shield of California for approximately 8 years. So that's where I really got into instructional design, facilitating training, adapting to different learning styles. Also being a people leader, managing, performance coaching, you name it, leading project management. And then actually in 2009, at the height of the housing market crisis, I lost my job. And so that sent me on a really difficult journey where I went back to school, because at the time I'd been very successful in corporate America without having an undergraduate degree. So I went back to school. I worked 3 jobs and I interned for our local congressman, and just really worked really hard, and decided that at that point I wanted to really focus on my career in HR. So graduated, got into recruiting for a little bit, and decided I really wanted to be more focused in the HR space. And so that led me on my journey. And I'll wrap it up by saying, like we were discussing earlier, HR sometimes leaders and recruiters can think very linear. So I had a little bit of difficulty landing this level of role that I wanted. So I just decided to go out on my own and do HR my way. And really started my business, which is KNB Sensible Solutions. And it's really focused on startups. In really what makes me different from other consultants in the market is, one, that I really focus on customized solutions. HR is not a one size fit all model for every company, and really in the startup space, right, getting them the foundational structure that they need to optimize growth. And that's what I do for fun. I love it.
That's awesome. Yeah, I couldn't agree more that everything needs to be customized. People always ask us, and maybe me specifically sometimes, what's the best applicant tracking system? What's the best HRIS, et cetera? And it's always like it's sort of a frustrating answer, but the answer is it depends. Depends on if you're a big company, small company, you got a tight budget, you want to focus on employee engagement, like whatever sort of your company is looking at. So it's really cool that you do this work and probably get to see the insides of a lot of companies. And my understanding is you work mostly with smaller companies and startups. Is that right?
That's correct, right? Nonprofit startups. I'm working with a client right now that's a little bit larger, 250 employees. Actually, I'm sorry, 268 employees. And so I'm, also witnessing the challenges that come when you don't do a proper HRIS implementation, right? Understanding where you're going to be in a year, understanding like what you need, right? And then you get all these systems that don't integrate well with each other, and it's creating a lot more manual work and bottlenecks for efficiency. So it's really interesting.
When do you think a company should first start thinking about buying an HRIS? Like at what size, or maybe what are some of the problems that they're starting to run into?
So I'm going to die on the hill with immediately. When you think about starting a company, right, and you think about your people, you need to think about your systems. I think that is a huge mistake that people make, especially startups. They think, oh, we don't need HR right now. We don't need those systems right now. We can get those later. But as you think about the number one reason, like the top 5 reasons that a startup fails, right, it's failure to have the right people, right, the right team. And so when we think about like, what's the correlation, right? If you don't implement a proper ATS at the, in an onboarding and your systems that get you the right experience for your potential employees, you are creating a problem. So immediately, like as soon as off the top.
Got it. So as soon as you start hiring, you should have, it sounds like those recruiting systems in place and applicant tracking systems, some sort of good candidate experience. And then what about sort of like the rest of the HR tech kind of stuff? Like when do you think like a, system of record is necessary for a company? When should I start worrying about that?
I'm going to die on this hill for the next 20 minutes. Before you hire, HR should be an integral part of your business strategy to be effective, to help you optimize growth. Even if again, let me be clear, not all companies need full-time HR. That's not what I'm saying. But you should be speaking to a consultant, someone in the space to help you plan that out, right? Because a lot of people and a lot of companies, of what I've seen, is HR becomes an after fact after they have like 8 or 9 employees. Culture is already established. You've already made a lot of missteps. But if you bring HR in at the beginning of that conversation and we implement a strategic plan, and I think that's the thing that I want to emphasize is that I understand that HR is often not thought of as a business partner and a business strategist, but when you find the right HR, they can help you build that plan. Because if you think about what type of experience you want your potential employees to have, the onboarding experience, the future of work is drastically changing. And so if you're not proactive about thinking about those decisions, you're going to waste time, you're going to waste money, and you're probably going to lose talent in this market.
Yeah, in this market for sure. Somebody told me this morning that it was a CEO of a assessment company, so skills assessment, and he was saying that a lot of his customers now, they're not even, forget about assessments, they're not even doing interviews. They're just, if they get a good resume, they just give somebody an offer. And some of these roles are like 6-figure jobs, like software engineers or things like that. It blew my mind, but that's just sort of where we are in the economic cycle. Maybe that'll change rapidly. I'm kind of curious, like, could you walk us through maybe like, and of course you don't have to use the company's name, but maybe like a company you worked with that is like 10 employees, and what tools do they have and how do they use those tools? And maybe we could start at like the like top of like the hiring funnel and kind of walk through like the employee life cycle of like, applying, interviewing, onboarding, becoming an employee.
So this is a great. So most companies that I work with that have employees at that level have absolutely nothing, right?
Yeah.
They're out of compliance. So let's talk about hiring. How do they hire? Do they have a system in place? No, they just usually are networking, saying that they need a position to fill, not having an application on file, paying people. A lot of them go through a PEO sometimes, but they don't understand the PEO. Like just this morning, I got an email from a client that said that they found out, they had been using a PEO to process payroll, but the PEO didn't pay the taxes.
Ooh.
So now they're in trouble and they're looking for a bookkeeper. Well, first of all, they wanted me to help them, and I'm like, oh no, that's not my space. So it's that, right? They're it's just, that's hiring, right? It's a lot of chaos, onboarding. They don't have a proper onboarding structure. They don't have a training plan in place, right? So the LMS is not in place, even just foundational, a thought process, right? They feel like, oh, we need to hire, but they are not realizing we don't have an infrastructure to support hiring. We don't have effective systems in place. We don't have an LMS. And so that all affects, the candidate experience. And then they start growing, right? And it's just chaos, and more chaos because of the failure to plan. And so a lot of them, by the time they get to me, they're stressed out, they're overwhelmed. The founder is stretched paper thin because they're playing admin, office manager, HR, and they're losing out on, really solidifying themselves in their potential market, right? And growing, because now they've got to go back and do all this cleanup, right? So that's a lot of what I see.
Yeah, it's a common story. What about like maybe a company that is at a slightly further step in their evolution, like maybe they're 50 employees? What sort of systems, if they're doing a good job, should they have in place at this point?
So key, let's emphasize if they're doing a good job. So if you have 50 employees, you should have a really robust HRIS system with a learning management system. You should have all of that in place. Your ATS should be able to meet your future needs for the next, 50 to 100 employees that you hire. You should have an effective onboarding system in place, and it should all be integrated so that you are able to accurately run reports, to capture data, to know how your candidate experience is. Are your employees engaged? You should be doing all of that, right? If you are doing what you are supposed to, you'll have all of those systems in place, and you'll also be thinking about, again, where do we want to be, right? Based on how we've grown. Do we plan to be at 125? Do we expect rapid growth where we might have to hire 150 employees, right? So that you can be prepared. That's an ideal world.
Yeah. And who do you think should be owning this? Like, I guess at the 50 employee marker, you almost certainly have somebody who's dedicated to HR. 10 person, maybe up to 100, you're just using like PEO and I don't know, relying on those functional leaders. But I guess like, at what point do you recommend companies hire a dedicated HR professional? And are they the ones that are owning all these systems, or is it more like, the CEO plus them? Or
So that's a great question, and I'm gonna die on this hill that HR should have a seat at this table immediately. Now, to specifically answer your question, do you need a full-time HR person? No, you might not need that until 150 employees, but should you be speaking to a consultant, right, and having some sort of advisory from HR immediately? I'm dying on this hill immediately. But now what you can do, right, is just have some strategy sessions and have a well thought out, 3-year plan. And obviously things change. Again, the future of work is changing. Technology is rapidly changing. So what we discuss today in 3 months, may look very different. If you can't, and PEO sometimes, are the answer for certain companies. However, what I explain to my clients, potential clients, and anyone that'll listen is the PEO is not dedicated to really learning your organization, right? They are not building relationships. They are not really understanding your mission, your values, right? And that right now is essential. I was just reading a Harvard business study that talked about 47% of employees want to feel like they belong, right? A PEO is not giving you that experience. And then to really answer your question, HR should not own it. It has to be a collaborative relationship where there's communication, respect, and cohesive working relationship. But we should be definitely having the seat at the table to guide the founder in the C-suite on what they need to do to really accomplish their metrics, right? And how they grow.
mm-hmm. Why do you think that so many companies discount HR and don't have them in that strategic kind of place in the company.
I mean, honestly, I think it's a couple of things. I'll be very frank. There's a lot of bad HR out there. And there is also this, assumption that HR is a cost center and we just suck money, right? And so they don't see it as an investment. I was just having a conversation last week, and he said to me when I was asking him questions, wow, like I never thought of HR as a business partner. And that's the wrong HR, right? HR should really come alongside you and be in some ways your business partner, really understanding the industry, the challenges, right? How you can navigate in the market, understanding the talent. That is HR's role. And so I think, a lot of people always say, why do you want to get into HR? And they say, I like people. You need an HR person that likes business and people, right? Because that's, what's happened over time. And I think that HR sometimes becomes a dump center for things that should not belong to them. And so they're left not being able to really focus on strategy and really help the company grow. I mean, if you look at the last 2 years, right, HR has become the COVID police, the accommodation police, right, giving testing employees, purchasing COVID kits, right? So is HR really there by your side, really helping you strategize? No, because you've disvalued HR and are giving them tasks that really should be contracted out, but it shouldn't be on HR's plate. We're not the party planners. We are strategic business partners that really want to help you optimize growth, scale you for growth, plan, keep your people happy, help you find the right people. And so it's a combination of both bad HR, a lack of understanding. I think we can do a lot more to really educate startups and business owners of the role that HR plays. Finally, I'll say, I have a lot of people that say, well, even if they do value HR, they'll say, well, I'll bring in HR when I get to maybe like 100 employees. And it's like, okay, do you know how to post a job? Do you know how to, stay compliant? And I get that a lot of startups are really risk averse, but they also really care about their brand and their people. And that is why you need to work with HR immediately.
Yeah. It's such an interesting phenomenon that it's true across the world. Like I talk to people in Germany or Brazil or India, and it's like HR is sort of the same, but it feels like it's changing really rapidly in everywhere, and especially the US, where there are a lot more companies that sort of get it and understand how to leverage it in the earliest days. And sometimes that's coming from startups that grow up into bigger companies. But I think even like some of the best run companies in the US, like Goldman, McKinsey, Google, like they sort of have understood this for a very long time. And maybe that's because they've always been in a war for the very sort of apex of talent out there. I'm kind of curious, like when you work with one of these small organizations and it's like, all right, you don't have an ATS, you need to get an ATS. What does that process look like? Like, where do you start? What are you looking for? How do you start to make a short list and kind of move the process forward?
Yeah, that's a great question. And one of my favorite questions, especially with the ATS, I think about really how I start is I always have a what I call a discovery call with any potential client. And I just want to listen, like what's going on in your business, right? What are your values? Where do you want to be? What type of talent do you need? Because again, that is huge. And when we talked about in the beginning, understanding that there's not a one size fit all model, this is where these conversations really matter, right? Do you want talent that is local? Are you going to offer remote work, right? Because if you're wanting to not have anyone out of state, right, then I need to be thinking, okay, your ATS system, we need to have the capability to maybe like eliminate people in a certain mile radius. Where are you going to advertise, right? If you're going to be advertising on LinkedIn, Indeed, then I'm thinking, then that's a check mark for what type of ATS. What type of metrics do you want to, be able to see, and how often? And, one of my most important things that I think, I'm seeing a lot more companies think about is diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? We know sometimes that AI can be biased. And so it's like ensuring that you have the right ATS and system. Maybe do you want an ATS that removes the candidate's name, right, in their location to mitigate bias? And so that's really the type of conversations that I end up having, but usually it's just listening, right? Because what I want to do is really understand who you are, right? Where do you want to be? What type of candidate is going to be drawn to you? What are your needs? So therefore I can effectively build a plan. And so what I've been doing, as someone, to be quite honest, like 3 years ago, I was like, heck, whatever. I'm like, that's not something I care about, right? And just being very uneducated. And so I've been just trying to learn about all of the different systems, right? A client may need Bamboo HR, that might meet their needs. It may need Paylocity, Paycor. It just depends where they're at. But not only where they're at, but where they want to be. And that comes from a lot of conversations and a lot of listening. And, I would encourage any business owners that are watching, if, pay attention to the questions that your HR person is asking you, or that you have about your business, because that's all going to go into selecting the right ATS. And again, integrations, right? Like, for example, if you're using Greenhouse as your ATS, or you want to use Greenhouse, well, Greenhouse doesn't integrate with Paylocity. So what's your solution there? I mean, I'll find one for you because I'm Sensible Solutions, but what's your solution?
What do you think is a realistic budget for a smaller company for their first applicant tracking system, HRIS?
So right now, I just was looking at these numbers. It's averaging, it depends, right? Like Gusto is, it's like $36, and then $12 per employee. Some of the more advanced are up to $145 per employee. So it really just depends, because the prices are all over the market. But the average right now per year for a smaller organization is about $8,000 a year. The last time I checked, which was like 48 hours ago.
Okay, pretty recent data.
Pretty recent.
And that's for like a full recruiting plus HRIS plus all the other stuff you need, onboarding, LMS, etc.
Correct.
Okay. And do you find that people are like, that's a lot of money, I don't know if I want to spend that? And if so, like, I don't know if you have any good arguments to kind of rationalize it.
I'm a former speech and debater, so I have a lot of arguments to rationalize it, but absolutely, right? I mean, if we think about startups, right, money, budget is really a serious concern. But you really have to understand, like, the number one argument is people are everything. They are your organization. And if you don't have the right systems in place to bring in the right people, engage the right people, then you're going to fail. Going back to that, reason that startups fail, not having the right team, right? And that all is linked to your HRIS. And it may feel like it's a lot of money now, but how much money are you wasting on attrition, right? Because you have a poor onboarding system and people are leaving because there's no clarity, right? You don't have an LMS in place. And so your employees are not getting trained, right? Add those dollars up and it's way more than your ATS. And so it's, again, thinking long term and not short term. And that's usually what I hear in the arguments, right? We don't need it right now. But if you truly understand the role that an effective HRIS plays in your people, your efficiency, right? Like, as a founder, 5 hours of admin a month is 5 hours you can be bringing in business. You
Mhm.
could be developing new profit centers. So that matters, right? And so I think it's just kind of shifting the mindset. And it's also like understanding from an HR perspective, these are valid concerns. Budget constraints are, it's very important, and we can't, um, dismiss that. But, it's all about the ROI, right? And that's also where it comes to put metrics in place so that you're really able to see the effectiveness of your investment. And that's another area where startups and even, companies up to 250, I see a gap is they've, invested this money, right? But they're not assessing, is it meeting the needs? There's no metrics in place. There's no data, right? Those are all things that you can do to see the ROI on your investment.
What are some of your favorite ROI metrics for HR
Oh
tech?
my, I think right now it's more of the qualitative, looking at your employees, if they're engaged, the learning development. I think those are extremely important right now. Obviously, looking at your applications, your hire rate, right, based on the your applications. I also think, how much money you're spending on payroll. Are you having, based on your industry, any kind of variances at different, times of year? Obviously, attrition rate. So those are a lot of mine.
Yeah, I like it. I feel like time to fill is an underappreciated one as well that I like to look at. Um, I'm wondering, we're sort of at the end of our chat here, and I'm wondering if you have any last piece of advice for especially smaller companies, startups that are thinking about their HR technology stack. I love the many hills that you are willing to die on that basically says do it right now. But do you have any other piece of advice or that are common pitfalls that you've seen, or maybe some nuggets that you're like, you got to make sure you do X when you start down this journey?
Yeah, absolutely. There are a lot, again, a couple of things. Join professional affiliations like your local chamber of commerce, you know, um, join groups that are open that have HR professionals in them. There are a lot of resources. Take time to really assess where your resources are at. Also, think about your culture, your organization. Like, who do you want to be? Where do what type of talent? What is your employee value proposition? Those things are extremely important. Now, thinking about tech, I think it's again a strategy. Don't focus on what do I need right now. Think about what I'm going to need in 1 year based on, strategic planning. And I also think be very mindful of who you bring in to work with you in any capacity. You know, when you decide to become a business owner, right? That is everything that you are, your sweat, your blood, your tears, your equity, long hours away from your family, right? You want to bring in people that believe in your mission just as much as you do, right? Obviously, they won't be as committed, but that's huge when you're vetting whatever type of consultant that you work with. Um, and even these organizations, these PEO organizations, if that's the route that you choose, think about the customer experience, the candidate experience that your potential employees will receive. And finally, if you do decide that you want to, hire an HR professional early on or an HR consultant, either early or later, um, don't be so close-minded, first of all. You really want to have someone that understands operations, understands people, and pay attention to what type of questions that they are asking you, and ask the right questions, right? How can you help me? What role are you going to play in our strategy? Um, Ensure that they have the capability, right, to understand your industry. the challenges in your industry. And when specifically for systems, I think it's really important to get feedback from other companies. Implementations and sales will promise you the world, right? But talk to other companies, other business owners in your industry, find out what they're using, what they like, what they don't like. And again, think strategically and be intentional about every decision that you make, and understand, this is the final thing, the role that your HRIS is going to play in your people, your candidate experience, your efficiency in your time. And hopefully, once you really wrap your head around that, it will help you to make a better decision.
Awesome. Kim, thanks a lot for sharing all these insights from being in the trenches over a number of roles, many years, and now, helping companies deal with these sorts of, problems. Where can people find you online if they want to follow up?
So I'm really, really active on LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn. I share a lot on LinkedIn. And you can also go ahead and find me on my website, which is, KNB Sensible Solutions.com. I do offer, a no cost discovery call. And so just feel free to book a discovery call with me. You can email me. My email is linked to my website. And, I'm always here to help. And, even if I'm not the right consultant, right, I really believe, as a, member of the National Small Business Association Leadership Council, I really believe in helping small businesses. So I'll do whatever I can to point you in the right direction.
Awesome. That's great. I love the sort of all, rising tides mentality. Like, let's all just help each other out.
Yeah.
Well, Kim, thank you so much. Thank everybody for tuning in, for listening. This is part of Select Software Reviews series on just talking to people who are in the trenches, using HR technology, solving these problems, and we'll see you next time.
All right.